And I often remind us as we're settling in to take a moment and just sense the community, whether you scroll through the comments in the live chat, just people checking in and saying hi, or just in any way you can to go beyond our, I think one of my teachers called it the mythologies of isolation. And it can be especially strong these days when we are physically more isolated in our homes than we would otherwise be. So it's important, this imagination and remembering and even sensing that we're here together and really appreciating. And not just the people who are taking the course with us, but all of our spiritual ancestors, all of our spiritual descendants, that were part of this lineage of human beings that have the great fortune. We're not completely overwhelmed by just survival needs. And we have this great fortune to be reflective. What is, what is this human experience, and how is it that our hearts become bound up? And how is it that our hearts can become unbound? How is it that we get caught up? Feels so compelling to be hateful, whether it's hate, self-hate or hate, anger toward another, all those different ways we separate out ourselves, disconnect. Does it have to be this way? This is our lineage, this curiosity about suffering, and in particular, this course we've been studying this fall. So as we settle in, like we've been doing, we'll do the Three Refuge chant a little slower than is traditional. And even though we can't hear each other, just that sense of singing, chanting together. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Tutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Tutiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Tutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami. And we settle in, feel at home in the body. Eyes can be open, gazing down toward the floor in front of us, or lightly closed. The Buddha describes metta, loving kindness, or this basic goodness of the heart, as a liberation, a temporary liberation, a taste of freedom. So in the most simple, ordinary way, as we're sitting here, feeling the body sitting, just allowing a natural generosity of the heart, just appreciating and caring and naturally wishing well for this life, for this body, this sensitive heart right here. And if we were to verbalize, it would be very simple. I care about this life. I care enough to be close right now. I care enough to feel whatever it feels like in the body, and to feel the quality of the heart and mind now. I care enough to stay close and open. And I care enough to wish well. May wisdom and love protect this heart, this life always. And may I find ways to be at ease with the changing conditions of this life. May I find ways to be loving and wise as I navigate this life. May I be at ease. And you can continue to repeat a simple phrase, or even just the word, the generous wish to be at ease, or the generous wish to be abiding with wisdom and love. And use, if you do use a phrase and repeat it, let it in a sense point the heart toward this generous and even radiant goodness. The heart that cares, the heart that wishes well, the heart that appreciates. We learn that it's possible to abide in this simple and beautiful attitude of metta, of this basic goodness, kindness. And we'll learn it has actually a visceral, or can at least have a visceral, beautiful, releasing quality through the body, the heart and mind. As we learn to trust and abide in this good-heartedness, this generous kindness. It doesn't have to be special, it could be quite ordinary. Like a beautiful, simple smile. It fills the body, fills the heart and mind, and outward from there. Wishing all beings ease, no matter the conditions. And we're just keeping this love, this simple, ordinary, generous love, we're just keeping it in mind. Breathing in, sensing this expansive love. Breathing out, again, just sensing this expansive, radiant goodness of the heart. Breathing in simple love in all directions. Breathing out this simple love, this simple kindness in all directions. And if there's any resistance, just generously include that resistance. Meet it with kindness. Oh yeah, sometimes there's resistance, and I care about that too. I don't have to have a problem with resistance or doubt or whatever might show up. I can just relate with kindness, patience, forgiveness. And we're learning to rest and abide in this wholesome, radiant quality of kindness. Practice is to trust it. Trust that it can be felt and experienced. Even if it's faint, that's okay. Just keeping it in mind. We're allowing the love, the kindness to have its effect on the body, on the heart and mind, and outward from there on the whole world. We let the love, this goodness, this generous goodness of the heart, we let it fill the space of the present moment. So there's no place untouched. The entire space, this inclusive space of the present moment, the love, the kindness goes everywhere, easily, generously. And of course, there's a real pleasure in this wholesome attitude of metta. So it's totally okay to notice that it feels good and to abide in the wholesomeness, the wholesome good feeling of this generosity of kindness. May this goodness continue. May it increase. May it never end. This kindness, this goodness of the heart. And especially attuning to the expansive, boundless quality of love. This inclusive quality. And as you can, really trust that you can relax in the wholesomeness of the heart, this generous kindness. Perhaps you don't need to repeat a phrase. Perhaps it has its own momentum and you can just trust it and abide and relax. Still keeping it in mind, feeling the healing effects of this generous love. But don't feel like you have to manage it or even do it. It's its own thing. It knows what it's doing. And as you feel comfortable, just begin to notice this vast space of love. But especially the space, the generous, vast, all-inclusive space. The space of the heart, the space of the mind. All of this space touched by kindness. But we're more interested in the space of the present moment that is filled with kindness. But we're keeping this sense of space in mind, the space of the present moment. Breathing in, simply aware of the space. Breathing out, aware of the space of the present moment. Not so much what's happening in the space, but the space itself. willing to simply abide in this space being known. And just appreciating the space. Space is being known. The space of the present moment is being known. And the peacefulness, the relative absence of selfing, of self-centered dramas, when we keep this space of the present moment, this simple space of knowing, just keeping this in mind. And it's really appropriate to notice and appreciate the peacefulness of the empty space of the present moment, empty of drama, empty of being pushed around by likes and dislikes. It's really appropriate to appreciate the release of drama, the release of entanglements, and just appreciating the heart, the mind, free from any struggle. So for the last 5 minutes or so, doing our best, just abiding in the peace of this heart, free from grasping, free from needing things to be other than the way they are. Letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. So take a moment and make adjustments if you need to. And then if Michelle is here tonight, maybe Michelle just put something in the live chat so I know you're here and you're available to help organize small groups at the end of the program tonight. And I think I mentioned at the beginning, tonight is the last night of our 8-week class on the Four Noble Truths. And the next class will begin on Monday, January 11th. It will be an 8-week class on mindfulness of body. We'll be covering the 4 foundations of mindfulness in the winter, spring, and summer of 2021. So keep that in mind, and of course we'll have the information about that when we're getting closer, sometime in December. We'll have the registration up for that. And maybe I'll just do a quick sound check, make sure that you're hearing me. Good, looks like there's some activity there. I'm always concerned that the internet drops out. Good, so you're there, folks. Good, so tonight we're going to talk about the Eightfold Path, just to review. So we're talking about the Four Noble Truths. These are perceptions or insights that we're developing. And really it's the Buddha's, how he talked about wise view. So instead of our self-centered view, and self-centeredness, of course, feeds greed, anger, and delusion, just like greed, anger, and delusion feeds the self-centered ways, patterns of thinking. And so the Buddha offers a different frame, which is that we're relating to experience in terms of, oh, there's dukkha, there's suffering, there's a cause, suffering ceases. And when suffering ceases in my heart, when my heart has a moment free of grasping, free of selfing, I get a little clarity about the way, the path. And the Buddha describes the path as the Eightfold Path. So this is what's said in that discourse, setting the wheel of Dhamma in motion. In the tradition, it's considered the first discourse, although it's probably coming together of different teachings from the Buddha that got formulated after the time of the Buddha. But in that discourse, in terms of the fourth noble truth, what is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering? It is the Noble Eightfold Path. That is to say, wise view, wise intention, wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood, wise effort, wise mindfulness, and wise concentration. There is this noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Such was the vision, insight, wisdom, knowing, and light that arose in me about things not heard before. This noble truth must be awakened to by cultivating the path. This noble truth has been awakened to, has been fully developed by cultivating the path. Such was the vision, insight, wisdom, knowing, and light that arose in me about things not heard before. And I find it really compelling, I guess, and useful how the path, having clarity about what life, what to do with this human life, really arises with insight. So that means, we should have a lot of humility about even what the path is. I mean, we may understand some things intellectually, we may have some intuition, but it's always good to have a lot of humility about even knowing what the spiritual path is about. And one of the really powerful things about listening to teachers and, really sincere Dharma practitioners who've been at it for a while, and they talk about their practice, and they talk about, like, if you ask people, well, what have you gotten from your practice over the years? A lot of what people will talk about is getting clearer about how to practice, getting clear about what the path is and what it isn't. And in a way, we always come into the path with all sorts of idealism and wrong ideas and self-centered, wanting to be special. So we become a Buddhist or we become a meditator as a way of becoming somebody special, somebody who's better than who I am right now, if nothing else. So let me just review what we've explored these 8 weeks. So one of the useful ways of just using the teachings on the Four Noble Truths is in terms of these 12 insights. So around the first Noble Truth, this collection of insights that we can have all day long. Oh, there is dukkha. The heart is struggling. My heart feels burdened. This is a teacher. This is something to understand, to open to. I really have in this moment an honest, sincere, open relationship to dukkha, to the squeeze of my heart, to the struggle in my heart. I've really been a sincere student to my dukkha, to my suffering. So that's the first 3 insights. There is dukkha. It should be understood. It has been understood. And I really recommend you learn these 12 because it just, like in any moment during the day, when we're struggling or we're confused, we can just ask, okay, what is this moment really asking? Is it the first noble truth? Like, have I done that work? How's my heart doing? You know what? It's struggling. I don't like what's happening. Okay, there's dukkha. It's my teacher. Can I have a respectful relationship? Really show up. There is dukkha. It should be understood. That's that recognition. I should have a respectful, intimate, open-hearted relationship to my dukkha because it might have something to teach me. I have opened to it. I have brought some curiosity to my dukkha, right? So that's a good place to start over, like when we've been absorbed in some sort of obsessive pattern or reacting, caught up in some drama in our life or in the wider world we're part of. Okay, there's dukkha here. And that dukkha is right here, right? It's in this mind body. Doesn't mean there isn't stuff going on around us. But we're, as a spiritual practitioner, first and foremost taking responsibility for what's going on here. Of course, we see what's going on here being mirrored out there everywhere. But this we can do something about. We can look at it. We can respect it for what it has to teach us. We can open to it. And what it does is it sends us to our next teacher. There is a cause. Whatever's going on, whatever that squeeze, that weight, that burden that I'm feeling, there's a cause and it's here and now. It's not in the past. It's not in the future. It's not somebody else. It's part of the dynamic right here in the body-mind thing we call me. There is a cause. The cause of dukkha should be abandoned. It has been abandoned. There is a cause, which is the attachment, taking desire personally. There is desire that just is life energy. Taking it personally turns out to be the cause for that squeeze, that heaviness, the burdensomeness of life. So if we've already respectfully shown up to the moment of suffering, then we can just ask, okay, so there's suffering. I really felt it. I'm relaxed with it. I'm curious. Is there attachment here? Oh, this is the attachment to desire. It's like wanting something to happen, wanting to get rid of something in my experience, wanting to become somebody. Okay, this attachment isn't helpful. And that's that, as I've talked about over the last several weeks, that place of real patience and courage to be aware of attachment, aware that it's the cause for the squeeze, the heaviness, and to be willing to stay with it. Oh, this isn't helpful. This is to be abandoned until it passes away, goes away. Oh, this is the cessation, right? The ending attachment. This is the ending of attachment. Oh, and we have to see that, as they say now, 10,000 times, just that generic point. We don't really get something until we see it over and over many, many times. And it's really the generalizing, how many times do we need to see that we're attached to desire? We have an agenda, we're controlling, we've given up. We can be attached in probably an infinite number of ways, identified in an infinite number of ways. But now we're patient, we're curious, we see it's not helpful, and then it drops away. And how many times do we need to see attachment dropping away before the mind generalizes something about attachment? Because for a long, long time, attachment feels personal. Like, oh, I know I'm attached. I know I shouldn't be attached. I'm so grateful that I'm, whatever that fixation I had earlier in the day about needing to get rid of this person from my life or needing to get this thing, now it's no longer obsessing me. I'm so glad that I dropped that burden, right? So in our ordinary relationship with attachment, it feels very personal. And when it's there, it's a personal problem. And when it goes away, it's a personal relief. But when we see it 1,000 times, 2,000 times, 10,000 times, in all kinds of variations, not in the same situation, but really the wisdom starts to generalize, and it understands something about the letting go of attachment. That attachment isn't self, right? So this really opens the heart to the third noble truth, where the heart has generalized the experience of attachment going away to the realization that the heart doesn't need to be burdened with any attachment or identification. So it's a little crack in the idea that all this struggling that we're observing in the second noble truth, there's a cause, it should be abandoned, it has been abandoned. There's a lot of like getting pushed around, like we're really intimate when the mind is attached, is fixated in some way. We really see that it's suffering, its connection to suffering. We really know it isn't helping. Eventually it goes away, we're grateful, appreciating the release. But we feel we're not out of the woods, right? Because it's just a matter of time before the next experience triggers more attachment. We get caught up. And then we eventually see, this isn't helping either. This is more of the same. It's gone away. Good. So that's a lot of our practice at the second noble truth level. But with time and a lot of that seeing, attachment arise, attachment cease. Attachment arise, attachment cease. The heart opens, it realizes something about that basic pattern of attachment arising and ceasing, which, we use words. We say, it's not self, it's nature, it's not self. Becoming attached is a natural phenomena. Attachment falling away is a natural phenomena. That's why the Buddha doesn't emphasize that you or I get rid of attachment. We want to see how it arises as a natural arising and how it ceases. And then that really changes, it really opens the heart to an experience of basically realizing the mind, the heart, free of attachment. Not of specific attachment, but the whole process of clinging has fallen away, right? Realizing that clinging is optional. So objects are still coming and going, experience is still happening. The different experiences that are coming and go, they'll be pleasant or unpleasant. When they're pleasant, it will trigger what pleasant experience triggers in us. If it's unpleasant, it will trigger that. But now the mind isn't orienting right? It's having an experience of not orienting around sense experience and its likes and dislikes and the attachments or whatever might get triggered. And maybe you had a little taste from the meditation tonight, where where we move from just that expansive feeling of kindness into a more neutral experience of space. And it's really nice, like when we're doing the metta meditation, the loving kindness, to really notice the pleasantness of that, because it brings in a lot of safety just in healing, just to sense the pleasant wholesomeness of a heart that's full of that generous kindness. And then to notice the sense of space, the space of knowing, the space that is empty of selfing, empty of self-centered dramas, empty of attachment to the liking and the disliking, because it's not paying attention. It's really we're like the instruction in the meditation was to, instead of orienting around the ordinary objects coming and going, we're really orienting around the space of the present moment, the space of knowing, the space that's empty of selfing. So we're noticing the relative absence of selfing, of self-centered drama, of liking and disliking. We're noticing that, and we're noticing the peace of a mind, relatively free of grasping, relatively free of clinging to our likes and dislikes, clinging to ideas of becoming somebody, right? And then from that place of the mind being relatively spacious and free of reactivity, then because of the force of habit and momentum, when the mind gets drawn back into some drama, the contrast is so apparent. It's so easy to go through those insights. Oh yeah, there's dukkha, should be understood, has been understood. There's an attachment here. This should be abandoned. It has been abandoned. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the mind free of grasping, relatively speaking. This should be fully realized, has. And then some clarity of the path. Oh, this is what this life is about. And the Eightfold Path, we have wisdom or wise view, wise intention. That's the wisdom piece. Then we have the sila piece, the ethical conduct, wise action, wise speech, wise livelihood. Then we have the sort of meditation piece, wise effort, wise mindfulness, wise concentration. And so we think of it as the wisdom third, the ethical conduct third, and the mind training third, right? So these three aspects of the Eightfold Path, and they're just different frequencies of our life. So the sila, the ethical conduct, is the more gross or dense or concrete or obvious part. And we're taking the insight from the third noble truth. Oh, this is the mind free of grasping. And we're integrating it in the world of relationship, ethical conduct, getting along with others, harmonizing with others, right? Because that's the thing, like that, wise people have said, there are these insights, these sudden shifts in understanding, deepening of understanding, and then it's a matter of really integrating and learning to live from that place, where the insight leaves an impression. The heart becomes changed when we see what we haven't seen before, and then it's learning to live from that impression that was left by the insight. We want to live from that place. Because, in terms of the conditioning of the heart and mind, it's not just one thing. It's not like there's a mark and we have to live from that me place. There are all kinds of tendencies and understandings. And so much of our practice, as our understanding deepens, is choosing to keep the deeper understanding, the more trustworthy understanding, to keep it in mind so we can live from that place. So as we're having insight into the heart free from grasping, the third noble truth, then we bring it into this area we call sila, wise action, wise speech, wise livelihood. And we bring the insight of our heart free from grasping, from self-centeredness, into the work of wise effort, wise mindfulness and concentration. We're basically taking care of the mind and distractedness and into non-distractedness. And we do the same thing with wisdom. We bring the deepening of insight into how the mind understands and how the mind works with intention. So we're basically the full frequency of a human life, from relatively gross, how we're interacting in the world, to relatively refined, the view, the wisdom and understanding in the mind. We're doing the work of integrating the insight into every aspect of our engagement with life, so that absolutely every aspect of the mind and body is living out of the deeper insight, the deepest insight. Nothing whatsoever should be clung to as I, me, or mine. Really, that insight we're taking, with the Four Noble Truths, it's reorienting the mind that dukkha is our teacher. And the most relevant thing about that teacher is the cause, this attachment to desire, taking desiring personally, and really realizing the three characteristics about attachment to desire. That it's coming and going, the attachment to desire comes and goes, that it's unsatisfactory when it's suffering, it's a cause for suffering, and that it's impersonal, that it's not self. And it's the ripening of seeing those three aspects of attachment, that it's changing, that it comes and goes, it's conditional, that it's dukkha, it's unsatisfactory. Attachment never leads to any lasting happiness, never helpful. Attachment's not helpful. Attachment to becoming, attachment to sense experience, attachment to getting out of here. It's not helpful. And it's not self. It's just this impersonal process that's empty in the sense of it doesn't refer back to a permanent me. And when that's been seen enough, then there's a real sudden seismic shift in one's understanding. And then we apply that understanding and develop it in these three aspects of our life. And that's really what the Buddha says in terms of the Eightfold Path. There is a path. It should be developed. It has been developed. And those are the last three of the 12 insights. There is dukkha. It should be understood. It has been understood. That's the first. There is a cause, attachment to desire. It should be abandoned. It has been abandoned. There is a cessation of suffering. There is a heart free of grasping. This should be fully realized. It has been fully realized, seen clearly for what it is. This is the way, right? And that opens the path. This is what the heart deeply desires, this freedom and this unhindered love, which is just the active, in my mind, the active expression of freedom, compassion without restrictions, without fear. There is a path, there's something to do with this life. Integrate the insight of not self, of its being nature, like how to have relationship, but we tease, we see how that insight, the impression the insight leaves, we keep it in mind, as we're in relationship with the world. And it's interesting, like we think of sila, the area of ethical conduct, as having a lot to do with restraint. Like we feel the tendency to want to take something that's not ours, but we restrain ourselves like, no, that's not the right thing to do. So how does this insight into not self support restraint? Well, because because of the tendencies in our mind to be greedy, to be angry, to be controlling, and all the different expressions of greed, anger, and delusion. But now we're keeping the deepening impression of not self and the freedom. We're keeping that insight in mind. We're, in a sense, letting it live through us, letting it sort of be the new reference point as we inevitably have to relate to other human beings, right? And earn a living and speak. But now, because of that deepening insight, when I feel an impulse to do or say something that's not so skillful, it's actually very easy for restraint to happen, because the impulse to steal, or the impulse to gossip, or the impulse to be insulting is seen as nature and not self. So when it's not self, it's relatively easy to feel what it feels like, that impulse to want to act out in an unskillful way. Wisdom can see and feel it, but it isn't so seduced. So then it gets relatively easy to start living in more and more harmonious ways, with kindness, with love, with a deep valuing of non-harming, willing to do the sticky, messy work of uprooting the causes for suffering in our relationships, in our families, in our communities. We talk about this a lot at Common Ground, how essential this work of, uprooting, unraveling the causes for racism, uprooting and unraveling the causes for sexism, classism, and all the different ways we take advantage and cause harm for one another, even in our relationship with animals, how we are with the planet, and the general kind of circles of life on the planet, the ecology of the planet. It's like there's no blueprint about how we do all this, how we resolve all of these ways of suffering. But removing the stickiness of self-centeredness, then the mind becomes so much more nimble as we feel the deep conditioning around sexism, patriarchy, around racism, around greed, about wanting wealth and not wanting to care for others. We just see those tendencies in the mind, but we see them without assigning a self to those impulses. And then it's relatively easy to do the ethical work of refraining from acting out impulses that are tainted with greediness or hatefulness or fear. It's easier to be a kinder, wiser person, really dedicated to non-harming. And it's the same way with this whole area of the Eightfold Path that's about working with our heart. The wise effort, wise mindfulness, wise concentration. And that category is called samadhi. And it's really about okay, now I've had some insight into not self, the impersonal nature. I've observed the rising and falling of attachment 10,000 times, enough times, that wisdom has started to generalize, kind of cracked the deep, deep tendency to always interpret experience from a self-centered point of view. And the mind sees, when it drops that projection of self on experiencing, the mind realizes something different. Now I'm applying that to just working with my thinking mind, my distracted mind, my worrying mind. So we're bringing that insight into not self into, let's call it a meditation, where we're sitting and we're just observing the mind and observing the body. But now, with that resonant insight that this moment, all moments are empty of self, meaning that what I'm aware of doesn't refer back to anything. It's just something being known. Well, it's a lot easier to work skillfully with distractedness, impulses to think this or to plan that, and to see them as just thoughts being known. Because that insight really helps the mind understand, yeah, that's just a thought. No, there is a nobody who needs to think that thought or needs to, how it is. We can, this is a problem with Google, it's like you can have a question, what is the current population of the United States? And now we need to have an answer. And every other question, oh, what is the etymology of that word? Where did that word come from? And it's like, but now when we have these sort of even restless, wanting to know something, wisdom with the resonance of that insight into not self, resonance isn't confused by any impulse to want to know this or want to figure out that or want to plan or want to remember what happened. What was that person's name? And it doesn't mean that we can't get that information. There may be a functional reason why we want that information, but there isn't a self-centered stickiness to needing. So even like the normal cognitive processes of thinking and planning and worrying and remembering, the way the mind begins to relate to that, it's just, yeah, it's just stuff. Like someone left a radio on, it's just cognition. And sometimes in terms of our duties and responsibilities, we tank the thinking process, and we let it sort of lead us around. But when it isn't needed, it's just sort of, it can be in the background and we don't have to feel pushed around. Just because I thought that thought doesn't mean I have to do anything about it. And that really helps in the meditative process, whether you're doing a formal meditation or just kind of going about your day, but you're aware of the mental activity. And it really allows the mind to more regularly be in a balanced place. That stability of present moment awareness that we call samadhi, because of wise effort, wise mindfulness, wise concentration. So the insight into not self makes the meditative or the samadhi, living with samadhi, that stability of present moment awareness, so much easier. And then, of course, with wisdom, it's really the same thing. That insight makes it natural for one to have wise view. Oh yeah, this is nature, not self. And wise intention just flows from that, right? Instead of the intentions to be greedy and to be aversive and to be distracted, the intention is to be kind and to let go and to really not want to cause harm. These are the wise intentions that come out of that deepening insight. Renunciation, letting go, kindness, and compassion. Those are the motive forces that are left when self-centered gets more and more teased out of the mind stream. So, of course, there's so much more to say, which is why we keep repeating the eightfold or the 6-year course on that Buddhist Studies course. We cycle back through. So, and a lot of you took the Eightfold Path this summer. I think we did it. So if you're wanting to dig a little bit more into the Eightfold Path, just look at Dharma Seed, or you can even go to the YouTube live stream and just look back in the Buddhist Studies section. And the summer course was on the Eightfold Path. So you get 8 weeks of detail, or maybe it was 7 weeks long in the summer. So you can look at that if you're interested in it. So I want to just mention, before we break into the small groups with Michelle, that there's a couple of announcements I just want to announce. So again, the winter course will be Mindfulness of the Body. Michelle will be available for anybody who wants to do a small group. And what I thought would be a nice conversation topic for the small groups, those of you who are going to stay, is just to reflect on the path. Both the path, the spiritual path, when it really is coming or seen in terms of self. I want to get myself from living in an unskillful way to living in more and more of a skillful way, to really understanding the path as being empty of self, and how to integrate the insight of the emptiness of self into all aspects of my life. So it's kind of a shift from where we all begin, where it's a personal thing we're up doing with our spiritual practice, to the teasing that out naturally, gradually as our practice deepens. And then it's really about integrating the insights that the heart has been having, the wisdom has been having, into everything that we do. So I'm assuming most of you are on our weekly email list. There's lots of programming happening around the election, both meditative practices that you can join in. Shelley Graff and I are going to do a 2-day retreat this Friday and Saturday. Still a few spaces if you'd like to join in. But also a lot of other programs that will really help us show up for the moment. Who knows what the moment will even be, how things will play out. But just this is where Dharma practice really shines, learning how to show up in a nimble, fearless way, committed to truth, seeing things clearly, speaking the truth, taking care of everybody, not harming. Yeah, and using our interactions to further this deepest desire for the heart to be free, even in the midst of the activity of life and the messiness especially. So it's been really great being with everybody. I think most of you know that everything Common Ground offers is offered freely. Please receive the course as a free gift. If you feel inspired to be part of that circle of freely giving, freely receiving, many ways you can give back. Just check the website and contact the office if you'd like to volunteer in some way. Hope to see you in the January course, everyone.